Imagine this. You're running a company. Maybe you've invested in one. You get the sales report, and wow, it's incredible. Orders pouring in, revenue looks fantastic. You're thinking, we've hit it big. But then maybe next month you find out the company's actually struggling to pay suppliers, maybe even staff. How does that happen? Sales booming, but the bank account's just empty.
It's such a common scenario, a classic trap, really. And it perfectly shows why, what looks like success on paper can hide something much more urgent underneath.
Right.
This whole situation points directly to, the absolutely critical idea of a cash budget. It's just such a vital tool, especially for new companies.
Yeah.
Because those sales figures, even reported profits, they can paint this really optimistic picture.
Yeah, it looks great.
But the actual flow of cash, that tells a fundamentally different story. Often it's a story about, survival.
That's the paradox, isn't it? Thriving on paper, but maybe teetering on the brink in reality. So, okay, our mission today is to really unravel how cash truly moves in and out of a business, going beyond just those headline sales numbers.
Exactly.
We're going to dive into a real-world example from our sources today. It's a newly formed company making metal boxes. We'll try and simplify these, sometimes complex financial ideas, to give you a shortcut to really understanding this essential part of business health. Okay, let's unpack it.
Sounds good. Let's start with that initial picture, the metal box company. Their sales figures, right out of the gate, they look really strong. January, $300,000 in sales. February jumps to $400,000.
Nice jump.
Yeah. And March climbs even higher, $550,000. And these aren't just like guesses. They're based on confirmed customer orders. So on the surface, it really does look like a soaring success.
Okay, so $300K, $400, $550K, big numbers. But how do they actually get paid for these? I mean, especially for a new business, just locking those down probably involved some, let's say, negotiation.
You're hitting the crucial point right there. What we found when we dug into the data is that sales revenue just doesn't equal immediate cash in the bank. It's rarely that simple.
Right.
The sales team, they were keen to get these big orders in the door, so they had to negotiate specific payment terms. And here's the breakdown. Only 10% of their customers paid immediately. True cash sales.
Just 10%. Wow.
Yeah, just 10. Then 60% of their credit customers, they'd pay after 1 month. And the remaining 40%, they'd pay after 2 months.
Okay, so there's a built-in delay for most of the money.
A significant delay. And there's another layer here. What's, quite insightful is that this industry, the metal box industry, it has this unfortunate reality like many others. About 2% of credit customers just never pay.
Oh, wow. They just default.
Yeah, they might go bust, dispute the invoice, whatever. It happens. So the company, quite smartly, proactively adjusted for this. They reduced that 40% expected in 2 months down to 38%, basically building in that expected loss from irrecoverable debt.
Huh. So they're not just dealing with payment delays, but also the risk of some customers just not paying at all. Right from the start. That must create a pretty big gap between sales booked and cash received. So what did the actual cash coming in look like for those first few months?
Okay, let's trace the cash. It's quite revealing. For January, remember $300,000 in sales. The company only received $30,000 in cash.
Just the 10%.
Exactly. Just that 10% paying up front. The vast majority of January sales, that $270,000 sold on credit, that cash wouldn't actually hit the bank until February and March. So despite $300,000 in sales, only a tiny fraction was immediately usable cash.
Okay, so right away, month 1, there's a potential cash crunch. Does February then start to look better as some of that delayed January money comes in?
It does start to catch up, yes. In February, the cash receipts jumped significantly, up to $202,000.
Okay.
That's because they got their 10% from February's own $400,000 sales. Plus, they received the 60% payment from January's credit sales finally coming through.
Right, the first big chunk of the delayed payments.
Exactly. And then, by March, the receipts really start climbing. They hit $374,000. This is the month where you see the impact of everything lining up the 10% from March's big $550K sales, plus the 60% from February's credit sales, and that final 38% trickling in from January's credit sales.
Okay, so it takes until March for the cash inflow to really reflect those strong sales figures from January and February.
Precisely. And this pattern continues. We saw in the data that April receipts were projected at $434,000, and even May was still bringing in $188,000 from sales made way back in March.
It really highlights that delay, doesn't it? It's not just a small lag. It feels like a financial chasm that could easily sink a business, even one making lots of sales. It just shows why sales figures alone are, they're only half the picture.
That lag effect isn't just some accounting term. It's the absolute make-or-break reality for so many businesses.
Yeah.
It turns what looks like success into a serious cash crunch.
Yeah.
And if you connect this to the bigger picture, it raises that obvious but critical question. If you're waiting maybe 1-2 months for cash from your customers, but your own bills, your expenses are due much sooner, how do you manage that gap?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Or maybe the negative $30,000 question, as we might see.
Exactly.
Huh.
This leads us straight into the other side of the equation, the cash outflows. And why profit, that number on the functional budget, doesn't always mean cash in the bank.
Right. Let's dive into that. Our sources, they show this company's functional budget, basically, their traditional profit and loss view. And on paper, it looks quite healthy. You've got the sales figures we mentioned. Then labor costs are projected at 20% of sales, materials usage at 25%, and overheads at 15%. You run the numbers, and it leaves them with a healthy 40% gross profit margin. I mean, that sounds pretty good for any business, right?
Oh, it certainly does.
Yeah.
For this industry, 40% is excellent. But this is exactly where we have to hammer home that crucial distinction. A healthy profit does not necessarily mean healthy cash flow. What's fascinating here, and where the cash budget differs, is how the timing of the actual payments changes everything. Let's take labor, for example. The functional budget shows labor costs. $60 for January, $80 for February, $110 for March. Looks straightforward.
Yeah, simple percentage of sales.
But
Yeah.
our sources tell us labor is paid weekly, 1 week in arrears, meaning the work done in 1 week is paid for in the next week.
Okay. So that 1 week delay effectively shifts when the cash actually leaves their bank account compared to when the cost is recorded for profit calculations. What's the practical impact on their cash outflow month to month?
Well, for January, the actual cash that went out the door for labor wasn't $60,000. It was $45,000, reflecting that lag.
Okay.
In February, it rose to $75,000 cash paid out, and in March, $108,000. You even see a smaller payment, about $22,000, stretching into April because of how the weeks fell at the end of March. It just illustrates that staggered payment effect impacting the cash.
Got it. And materials. I mean, for a company making physical things like metal boxes, that's going to be a huge cost. How do new companies like this usually handle buying materials, especially if they don't have, a long credit history?
That's a massive challenge, you're right. Because it's a new company, our sources show the material supplier is demanding cash at the time of delivery, basically COE.
Ouch. No credit terms at all.
None. There's no payment track record yet, so the supplier sees them as higher risk, maybe worried they'll fail. So this forces a really tough payment term for materials. 50% has to be purchased and paid for in the month prior to the sale it's needed for.
Wait, before the sale?
Yes, half of it. And the other 50% is purchased and paid for in the actual month of sale.
Okay, so this means the company is literally paying out cash for materials before the sales even happen, and certainly long before they get paid by their customers for those sales. What do those material cash outflow figures look like then? This sounds expensive up front.
It is. And this is a really significant detail showing that upfront cash demand. The company actually had to pay $38,000 for materials back in December before they even opened their doors in January, just to cover those initial January sales needs.
Wow, okay. Pre-revenue expenses hitting hard.
Exactly. Then, in January itself, the cash outflow for materials was $88,000. In February, it actually peaked at $119,000, reflecting the purchasing needed for February and prepping for March's big sales jump. Then in March, it dropped back a bit to $69,000 based on needs for March and prepping for April.
So there's this real front-loading of expenses, especially materials, happening way before any significant cash from sales starts rolling in properly. What about overheads? Anything tricky hidden in those numbers?
Yes, there's a really crucial adjustment with overheads that often catches people out if they're just looking at the profit statement. While the functional budget lists overheads $45K for Jan, $60 for Feb, $83K for March, these figures include a $10,000 monthly charge for depreciation.
Oh, depreciation.
Right, and depreciation, as you know, a non-cash item. It's an accounting method to spread the cost of an asset, like machinery, over its useful life. You pay the cash when you bought the machine, maybe last year. But the monthly depreciation charge itself doesn't involve any cash leaving the bank now.
Right. So for a cash budget, we have to pull that out. We're talking about subtracting $10,000 each month from the budgeted overheads to get the actual cash going out the door for things like rent, utilities, salaries.
Exactly. That's a classic example of how accounting profit really differs from cash reality. So for January, the actual cash outflow for overheads is $35,000, not $45,000.
Right.
In February, it's $50,000, not $60,000. and in March, $73,000, not $83,000. Getting this distinction right is absolutely vital for understanding the company's true liquidity.
Okay, I think we have all the pieces now. The delayed cash coming in, the often front-loaded or staggered cash going out. Now for the big reveal. The moment we put it all together in the cash budget. The metal box company started January with $150,000 in the bank. Walk us through how that starting cash holds up over these critical first 3 months.
Right. This is where the cash budget really shows its power. And often it's sometimes shocking truth. Let's look at January. We calculated inflows were only $30,000, remember?
Just the 10% cash sales.
But their total outflows, adding up that lagged labor, $45K, the big materials payment, $88K, and the adjusted overheads, $35K, came to $168,000.
Oof. $30K in, $168K out.
Exactly. That results in a net cash outflow for January of $138,000. They started with $150,000, so they ended the month with just $12,000 left in the bank.
Wow, okay, so they scraped through January, but barely, just $12,000 left. What about February? This feels like it could be the make or break month.
February is indeed where let's call it, the predicted crisis hits. Cash inflows, remember, they rose quite a bit to $200 to $2,000 as January's credit payments started arriving.
Okay, better inflow.
But outflows also jumped significantly. Labor was $75K, materials hit that peak of $119K, and overheads were $50K. Total outflows, $244,000.
So $244,000. So $202K in, but $244K out. Still negative.
Still negative. A net cash outflow of $42,000 for February. Now remember, they only started February with $12,000 in the bank.
Oh, dear.
So you do the math. $12,000 opening balance minus $42,000 net outflow. Their closing cash balance predicted for the end of February is negative $30,000.
It's deficit. There it is. You know, it still feels almost counterintuitive after seeing those strong rising sales figures for Jan and Feb. So they're projected to run out of cash. What happens in March? Does it get worse or does the tide turn?
Fortunately, the tide turns dramatically in March. Remember those really strong cash inflows we calculated? $374,000 finally hits the bank.
Right, from the combined effect of Jan, Feb, and March sales payments.
Exactly. And outflows, while still substantial, actually dropped a bit compared to February. Labor, $108K, materials, $69K, overhead, $73K, totaling $250,000.
So $374K in, $250K out. That's positive.
Yes, a strong positive net cash flow for March of $124,000. Now, they started March in that $30,000 hole.
Right, the deficit from February.
But adding the $124,000 positive flow means they recover completely and end March with a healthy $94,000 cash balance in the bank.
Okay, so the cash budget painted a really clear picture. Smooth sailing initially looks likely, then bam, a February cash crisis looms, followed by a strong recovery in March. What does seeing that February deficit in advance actually allow the company to do?
This is precisely the power of the cash budget. It's foresight. Knowing maybe back in December or early January when they prepared this budget that February would likely bring a $30,000 deficit allows the directors to plan.
Instead of just reacting when the bank calls?
Exactly. They can proactively arrange a short-term loan or an overdraft facility just to cover that specific month. Or maybe they could try to negotiate slightly better payment terms with a supplier, or perhaps delay some non-essential spending plan for February. They avoid being completely blindsided and facing a genuine liquidity crisis that could actually sink the company, regardless of how good its sales look.
So it's not just about dodging disaster. It sounds like it's also a crucial tool for strategic planning, for making smart decisions about growth.
Precisely. Let's take an example. Say the company identified a great opportunity to buy a piece of non-current asset, maybe some new machinery, or a delivery vehicle costing $60,000.
Okay.
Looking at the cash budget, they can immediately see, forget about paying for that in February, they'll be $30,000 in the red. Yeah. They simply don't have the cash.
Right.
But March, they end March with $94,000 in the bank and generated $124,000 positive cash flow during the month. Paying $60,000 in March looks perfectly feasible. It allows for informed timing of investments.
And this ties into the bigger financial picture too, right? Like preparing other budgeted statements.
Absolutely. The cash budget is a cornerstone of the master budget. The outputs feed into preparing, for example, the budgeted statement of financial position or balance sheet. We can actually calculate some of those end-of-period balances directly from the budget data.
Like what?
Well, for instance, their budgeted materials inventory at the end of March, the raw materials they expect to have on hand. Since they buy 50% in the month prior, and April's forecasted sales are $700K needing $175K of materials, 25%, they need to have bought half of that, $87,500 worth, in March. So that's their budgeted closing inventory.
Okay, makes sense.
Or trade receivables that some customers still owe them. At the end of March, who still owes money? Well, the 60% of March credit sales who pay after 1 month, and the 38% of March credit sales who pay after 2 months, plus the 38% of February's credit sales who pay after 2 months. You add all that up based on the sales figures and terms, and it comes out to a budgeted $621,900 owed to them.
That's a lot of outstanding cash. And what about what they owe? Trade payables.
Interestingly, zero. Because their supplier demands cash on delivery for everything, they don't actually build up any trade payables in this scenario. It's unusual, but a direct result of being new and those tough supplier terms.
Got it. And it seems like this budget isn't just for planning. It also becomes a yardstick later on, a way to monitor if things are actually going according to plan.
Absolutely. It's a critical tool for monitoring performance and flagging potential problems or inefficiencies. Think about those trade receivables we just calculated, budgeted at $621,900 for the end of March.
Yeah.
Now imagine it's actually the end of March and the company looks at its real accounts. What if the actual amount owed by customers is, say, $780,000?
Oh, much higher than budgeted.
Right. Assuming sales revenues themselves were roughly on target, that immediately signals a potential problem. It likely means customers are taking longer to pay than the agreed upon terms. Maybe the 1-month payers are stretching it to 45 days or the 2-month payers are taking 3.
So the budget flags an issue with debt collection.
Exactly. It indicates a possible inefficiency in their credit control or collections process.
Yeah.
It prompts management to investigate why customers are paying late and take action to improve collections. It acts as a real-time health check on operational efficiency.
So wrapping this up, what does this all really mean for you, the listener? I think the Metal Box Company's journey working through its cash budget really hammers home this point. A cash budget isn't just about accountants crunching numbers in a back room.
No, not at all.
It's a critical foresight tool. It's what separates looking good on a sales report from having a truly healthy, sustainable operation. It empowers businesses to see around corners, navigate those potential financial bumps in the road, and make smart, proactive decisions instead of, reactive, desperate ones. It really can be the difference between a sinking and swimming, even when sales seem to be booming.
And maybe connecting this to the bigger picture, thinking beyond just this example. It encourages a more critical way of looking at any business. What deeper insights about a company's true operational health, its resilience, its actual ability to grab opportunities, or just weather storms might you uncover if you look past the headline sales or the reported profit, if you focus instead on the actual ebb and flow of its cash? Because that's where the real story, the practical reality of the business, often lies.